Good afternoon. I'd like to welcome everybody to the December 1st meeting of the St. Mary's County Planning Commission for one of our work sessions for the comp plan. I'll let the board members introduce themselves. Starting at my left,
Patty Robran.
Howard Thompson.
Joe Van Kirk.
Jay Cousineau.
Connor Loughran.
And Lynn's with us on Zoom today. Good afternoon, Ms. Delahaye. How are you today?
Good afternoon, Chairman. Thank you for letting me zoom in.
Well, I'm glad to have you. Also with us this afternoon, our Director of Department of Land Use and Growth Management, Jessica Andritz, her Deputy Director, Courtney Jenkins. The other Deputy Director is on vacation, and we'll see her when she gets home, Brandy Glenn. Also with us this afternoon, our Deputy County Attorney, Mr. John Sterling Hauser, our Acting Director of Department of Public Works and Transportation, Donnie Mills. From the St. Mary's County Planning, St. Mary's County Metropolitan Commission, we have Christy Hollander, and we also have their Director, George Erickson, is with us. Let's see, the Director of Environmental Health, Heather Moritz, is here. Our video media producers today, Amy Carter and Andrew Beckman, are also with us this afternoon. And we good for there? Okay, Jessica?
Well, good afternoon and happy Cyber Monday to all of you.
I'm sorry. Before I start, I'm sorry. I didn't say, we got Leanne King is here with us from Clarion Associates, and I don't see her. Is Jasmine with us today?
No, Jasmine's not with us today. She's wrapping up her time off, but we do have Angeline Crowder with us from Burns & McDonnell. That's part of our consultant team that will be assisting with the discussion.
Okay, thank you, ma'am. I'm sorry.
All right. So just as a reminder of sort of where we've been, we started out these work sessions back on November 14th, where we started talking about housing, and we finished up that conversation then on the 21st of November before we moved into public health and community services. And then last week, we reviewed environmental and natural resources and finished up with natural hazards, vulnerability, and resiliency. And today, and it may be a little ambitious, but we're going to stick to it and see how far we get. First, we have transportation, and then we will round out the day with public infrastructure and facilities. Our next meeting time for the work sessions will continue on December 12th. Where we'll talk about economic development and growth management to the extent that there's time. And then we have reserved January 9th for any matters that we didn't get to, including implementation. So if we can go ahead and get started with the transportation framework and analysis. I understand and I can see that Donnie Mills is with us today, and so hoping we can just jump right into it, Mr. Chair.
Yes, ma'am.
So you'll notice that we have quite a few goals this time on pages 2 and 3, and as you can see, they're arranged according to topics. The first topic being biking, walking, and hiking, the next being roads, then transit, then water access, and last but certainly not least, PACS and our regional airport. So not unlike the other chapters and text that we've talked about, this particular section starts off with an overview of the current landscape here in St. Mary's County. It also shares quite a few of the community concerns and also the priorities as we heard through the two public engagement windows that were held earlier in the year. You'll see the importance of interdependency and integrated planning as we think about the intersection between transportation and some of the other topics like economic development and public health, and of course, environmental sustainability and resilience. So if we jump to page 9, that's where we begin the first topic, biking, walking, and hiking. And you'll see that the first goal is a new one, and it is to ensure a safe and complete pedestrian network. Now, I will say that while there are a variety of goals here, just because something is listed as number 1 doesn't necessarily make it more important than the other goals that are listed. And in this particular section, I believe there are 5. So this particular one is ensure a safe and complete pedestrian network. And as you can see, we do have some new policies and others have been carried forward from our current 2010 plan.
Jessica, quick question.
Yes,
I'm
please.
Apologize for cutting you off. Is page 4 to 8 all just boilerplate stuff from the last plan?
No, it is
Or-
not.
Well,
No.
why don't we, should we go through
Happy to do that.
some of that and just kind of see if anybody has any questions? I had a couple things written down
Absolutely.
at various ones.
Yes, absolutely. So if we start at the top of page 4, that's where we've leveraged the name of our plan. So we're at St. Mary's 2050 Charting Our Tomorrow, and this section talks about the importance of charting a connected tomorrow. And so we start off with the transportation landscape and what it looks like and feels like to those that avail themselves of our public transit services. So happy to take any questions or feedback that you might have on this page 4.
Well, I just hope that we kind of, you don't have to read verbatim, but I'm just kind of hope we go kind of hit the highlights of each section, and then if anybody, because I don't have a question about every single one, but I did
Okay.
have a couple.
Sure, absolutely.
different
So this is
questions.
just talking about the landscape, as I said, the various services that our county provides, and some of the overall priorities of the county that, talks about the safe and efficient, I'm going to say fair and equitable access to transit, understanding and recognizing that public transportation is an important aspect of our community. Obviously, Acting Director Mills is here and can speak a little bit more in depth about it, but earlier this year, the STS service went fare-free, I believe, which is sort of following suit in what we've seen with other neighboring jurisdictions and other places throughout the state. And I think this has increased ridership, but I don't have that data in front of me. That's something I think we could probably get next time if you felt like that was necessary. But then moving on to page 5, that's where you'll start to see a summary and some discussion about the feedback that we received during the 2 community engagement windows. You'll see the first one involves roadway congestion and the concerns about sort of the road infrastructure, if you will. The second point on page 5 generally talks about the accessibility to public transportation and a desire to see the services expanded. Then if you flip over to page 6, you'll see the recognition that the community has prioritized the ability to get around our community, not just by car, but also by bike and walking, of course. This section also sort of underscores the importance of safety, and safety has been a significant concern for those that participated in the surveys and community visioning sessions. Then going on,
Jessica, back to page 5, I'm sorry. We
Yes,
kind of
sir.
went through that kind of quick. Under the traffic congestion and road infrastructure, is it a better thing to, I'm not even sure what'll be changed when you do the zoning ordinance update. Is that a better time to talk about a few possible changes?
so yes, unless there is a section of our current comprehensive plan that you think may conflict with the current CZO, Comprehensive Zoning Ordinance. Because remember that your comprehensive plan will serve as the foundation for the regulations that are later adopted to sort of implement or bring into fruition some of the ideas and priorities that come from the comprehensive plan. So certainly we could touch upon those. I wouldn't want to say, no, table all of those items because I don't know what they would be, but I suspect that most, if not all, can be addressed through ordinance updates, but certainly laying the foundation and having the discussions now may prove to be quite productive. So we're happy to take any questions and thoughts that you have.
Well, I mean, I don't know if there's any particular things that I could say now. You know, I always kind of thought, I think don't the state and the county use different thresholds for measuring traffic? I mean, I think that's always that has came up many times. Don't somebody use the I can't think of the names of them, Donnie, but
The critical lane volume?
yes, don't the state and county use different
Yes.
things, just kind of things like that would kind of seem like we wasn't fighting each other. I don't even know. I think the counties is a little more stringent than the states, isn't it? Or vice,
Right.
counties is better for the citizens.
Yes,
Okay.
it is.
Yeah, that kind of stuff, and I don't even know what luck we'd have with state roads being, you know, I guess you can't implement that within something, but, you know, and I've always been a traffic person. I always thought that, like I touched on at the last meeting, it seems almost impossible to me that they used to be the old comp plans was listed on the website. I don't even know if they are now prior to 2010. But there's been plenty of paperwork that we've had over the years, and some of them that used to show, especially through the Lexington Park Developmental District, that we had a lot of failing intersections like E's and F's, not just at Route 4 and 235. And then when you look on a lot of the developers bring stuff forward now, they're all E's and B's. I don't understand what happened to that. I mean, I know some turn lanes were extended and things were done throughout there. I'm not saying any one particular place, but you know, you don't see them when they come in here with their traffic studies anymore. It seems like everything except Route 4 is a B, C at the worst. I don't know what happened,
And I think
whether things changed, or, you know, whether some of the rules changed at the states, because most of them are state roads, whether some traffic data is different. I'm just curious. I don't even know if this is the time to really talk about that. It would be better maybe at the possible zoning change, because I know this is just an overview of, you know, like you said, a plan of what you want to happen throughout the next years, and that can be a part of it then, or, so I'm just curious if this will be a time to talk about that, or probably during the zoning ordinance update, maybe.
so. These are things that certainly will come out as part of the comprehensive zoning ordinance update. But what I can say, and of course, I've only, you know, not even been here, but a couple of years, so I don't have the history that you and others may have in the room, but I know one of the concerns that the public has stated over time is that the intersections and the close proximity of the intersections that are studied for a particular project to go forward are rather small. I'm going to say a small radius between, you know, the development and, you know, the intersections that are required to be studied, whereas, you know, a broader look or, you know, a longer look or amount of distance between the project site and various intersections might tell a different story. So it's just a matter of the frame of reference and how wide the scope is in the review. But things like that would be part of the CZO update. Donnie, I don't know if you have anything to add to that.
Well, I think for the changes that you're seeing in level of service, some of that is due to FDR. So the more links that we've added to FDR, the more trips we're taking off of 235. So it's been really successful on pulling trips off of 235. So that could be part of it, that and what you mentioned, and adding turn lanes, adding links to the turn lanes, could also be playing a factor in why you're seeing the level of services drop some, or getting better, let's call it. But I'd say a lot of it's because of FDR. I mean, every time we do counts on FDR, we're doing them quite often, just to kind of keep monitoring what's, how many people are really using the road, and it's surprisingly how many people are on that road.
All right, well, thank you.
All right. So that was on page 5. Did you have any other comments or questions relative to public transportation access and expansion as expressed by the community? If not, we can move on to page 6.
Jessica?
Yes.
This is Lindell, hey. I just have one question about the public transportation and access. Will we get some statistics later on as we get closer to that? I'd like to know, how it has improved and the usage over the past couple of years.
Sure, I think that's something that we could ask DPW and T to put together, and I'm sure that they report on it on a somewhat regular basis. I won't speak for them, but we can certainly get ridership data.
Okay, thank you.
Absolutely. All right. So the next item then, bringing us over to page 6, just the community's desire to have more, hiker biker paths and trails, and there are specific locations that were expressed during the community engagement windows, and of course the importance regarding safety and regulations and things like that. Moving then on to the next section is the acknowledgement that you can't look at transportation issues in a bubble. They're going to interconnect with the other topics that are mentioned here. The first one here is transportation and land use, and recognizing that you can't have, the efficient use of one without examining and prioritizing the other. So I don't know if you have any questions about anything, questions or comments relating to the items on page 6. But seeing none at the present, we can move on to page 7. Again, talking about the intersection between transportation and other disciplines, and certainly topic areas of any proposed comprehensive plan, specifically economic development, public health, and as we talked last time, the environmental sustainability and resiliency. A big one being how area roadways are impacted by flooding, certainly making it unsafe for cars, but certainly pedestrians and bikes as well. So if there aren't any comments for page 7, then I can move us on to page 8. So these are the key themes for this section on transportation, so enhancing multimodal connectivity, which should not be a surprise to anyone. Neither are the rest of these items addressing traffic congestion, trying to promote equitable access to transportation, being an important aspect of people certainly working outside the home, but also as we look to educate our children, certainly understanding transportation and how that affects school attendance important. Integrating transportation and land use, again, not a surprise, but there is the explicit mention here that those two things need to go hand in hand, and again, as we already talked about, resiliency and the importance of regional connectivity. That's something that I know Courtney in long-range planning delves into. But those are some of the ways in which transportation sort of affects various aspects of living and working here in the county.
How do we accomplish the very first paragraph? On
And-
page 8.
Okay. Implementing strategies to alleviate traffic congestion? Is that what you're asking about?
Yes.
Okay. So some of that stuff would come through updating the comprehensive zoning ordinance, but it also does require partnership with the state. I don't know, Donnie, if you have other things to add. And then, of course, we've got Leanne King on the line also that can also share some of the strategies that she's seen other jurisdictions employ. So she's available as a resource as well.
Leanne, have you done any other comp plans in Maryland? I can't remember your resume.
We've done several in Virginia, the Carolinas, states throughout the Southeast, but this is our first plan in Maryland. We've done code work in Maryland before.
I was hoping to
Ordinance
hear
work.
you say that you had a really good connection at State Highway Administration, that, that
Well,
we
the
were going to lean on.
Angelin might be able, and folks at Burns and McDonald, they have an office, I believe, in Baltimore. They might actually be able to provide you that connection. That was one of the reasons we wanted them on the team.
Okay, well, maybe when we come back next time with the transportation part, ask them to chime in or maybe Zoom in with us so we can ask them a few questions maybe.
I think Angeline is on the line.
Yes, she is.
For some reason, her picture's not popping up.
Can you hear us, Angelin? There you go.
There she is.
Okay.
I was clicking up buttons enough times, it will show me and you can hear me. I don't have a specific contact that's coming to mind at the state level, but while we are continuing the conversation, I'm going to reach out to a few other folks and see if we can grab that specific information.
Well, I don't know, we'll be able to ask you the questions that might come up today, but we sure would like to know if, maybe if you have some further knowledge with State Highway, when we get to that part, it would be helpful to the board.
Absolutely.
Well, and Courtney may be able to just add her voice here. So as you know, one of the things that our office does is serve as the administrator for the MPO. And so we meet regularly with a representative from MDOT. So if there are specific questions or concerns, and if it's appropriate, we could pass those things on to them during the course of our time together with them.
And I'll add that DPW&T has quarterly meetings with SHA to go over project status, on both our projects and their projects. So we do meet on a regular basis with them.
Okay. Okay. 'Cause, 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 'cause
So one of the things that was also asked is, so what do you do to implement strategies to alleviate traffic congestion? So as Mr. Mills spoke earlier about, the FDR project, that's certainly a way to alleviate traffic congestion. And the other thing that I believe the MPO is working on, and Courtney, you can probably talk about this, are some future studies that are being proposed for some of the area in St. Mary's County. If you could maybe share that
Sure.
with the Planning Commission.
So with the MPO, it's the Calvert St. Mary's Metropolitan Planning Organization. And each year we have the UPWP, which is the Unified Planning Work Program. And with that, we receive federal dollars to do some transportation studies. So one that is getting ready to get started here soon, very soon, is the FDR Boulevard study that's going to show how much traffic has been alleviated with adding FDR Boulevard, and then also looking to plan, I guess, for, Donnie, would it be Phase 3B or Phase 4?
Phase 4.
Thank you. And then another one we have coming up this fiscal year is to do a multimodal study. And so that will look at different ways that we can increase, bus ridership, hopefully, and biker, walker areas, things of that nature. So we have those two studies coming up. And I know with the estate, a lot of times they want to see the transportation studies done, and then from there, projects can be submitted. So that's something we are working on a lot lately.
And Jessica, I'm happy to chime in if that's helpful.
Yes.
Sure. So as Courtney was just talking about, there's, many layers of transportation planning once you get to the local government, because you've got, state and regional entities, and then you've got your own Department of Public Works. And so there are various kind of levels of transportation planning that happen at each of those levels of government. So for a comprehensive plan that is, we'd like to say, is kind of physical planning focused, so it's really looking very specifically at land use and development and how that's influenced and interacts with transportation, economic development, all the other factors. I think one of the things that's really important with respect to traffic congestion and alleviation of that is thinking about how you design and land use patterns within your community. And so one thing that we'll get to talk about it a little bit more in the growth management section, but it's creating places where people can kind of park once, get out of their car and access a lot of different things, or have closer proximate access from their neighborhoods to other places that they could walk to, bike to, et cetera, that remove trips off the road. So that's one way to alleviate congestion moving forward as your community grows and you get new development. I think another one is just like Courtney was talking about, this multimodal study, providing different alternatives for people to get to different places. Most places, and this is true of most communities across the nation, to get to most places you have to drive, and some people want the option to be able to access places outside of their vehicles. It's not that cars are going away or roads are going away, because we know that's not the case, but when you provide more choices, you can actually reduce traffic congestion. So that's another way to kind of safely provide people with access to different places, using different what we call modes of transportation, walking, biking, taking transit, or driving. So those are the two big ones I wanted to mention.
All right. Thank you. Anything else for us? All right. So that brings us then forward to page 9, beginning with the general topic of biking, walking, and hiking. And you'll see this is where we have the first goal: ensure a safe and complete pedestrian network. And as you can see, this is a new goal. And I'm going to say new in the sense that it's printed as a goal, but I'm sure in various places throughout our 2010 plan, this has been an ongoing priority. So with that, as you can see, there are 5 policies. Some of them are new and others are carry forward. The ones that are new on page 9 are policy 1.2, require sidewalks for new development. And so certainly that would help to create safe spaces for people to be. However, you also have to balance that out with the topic that we've talked about a lot the last couple of meetings or work sessions regarding attainable housing. So I don't have the current, I'm going to say, cost of putting in a sidewalk, and I don't want to, throw Donnie a curveball here, but when we require things like, parking lots and sidewalks, all of that stuff takes money. It's not cheap. So that is something to consider, is that when you do prioritize, I'll call them either necessities or amenities, it is at a cost. Then you'll see we have policy number 1.3, systematically filling gaps in existing sidewalk network. And I think that's to address a general land use planning concern that is not unique to St. Mary's County, which is sometimes you have sidewalks going to nowhere because, you've got some new development that is there. You require sidewalks, but the guy next door, hadn't developed his property or done anything like that. So, you build the sidewalk up to the line or wherever the buffer yard might be, and then it stops. So maybe trying to identify certain areas in the county where there is that stop go of the sidewalk, and evaluating where connections could be placed. But as far as how we actually get that accomplished, I think that's beyond the scope of today's session. And then you'll see the last policy is just a carry forward from the 2010 plan. So I don't know if there are any questions about page 9.
I have a question about 1.2.
Yeah.
I know we talked about that in prior weeks also about sidewalks. We used to see them in every plan, then all of a sudden they went away a lot. And I don't know why, because they were still addressed in the 2010 comp plan, maybe not as stringent as this, which says mandate the inclusion. So there is no question about it would have to be housing developments and commercial development would have to have sidewalks.
Yeah, that's certainly what's being proposed.
I mean, I don't have a problem with that, and that's developer cost. Now, if the county says they want to fill gaps in sidewalks, that may, come back on public works eventually, but, that was one of the big questions that we always got years ago from the developers and their representatives. Well, we're building something on this road that has no other sidewalks. So it kind of went away. But in the future, if you put that piece in, that's one less piece somebody else has to do.
Sure.
When it comes to fill gaps in where you don't have them. So, I kind of like 1.2 myself, but we're going to get a lot of resistance with that.
Well, and it's also to keep in mind, so let's take a look at the specific text. So you said mandate the inclusion of sidewalks in all new residential and commercial development. But when we're talking about new residential development, you'll notice that it says in parentheses, zoned at less than 1 acre lots. So, we're not talking about putting a bunch of sidewalks, out in the country with large lot subdivisions, but places where you're going to expect a higher density and intensity of use, where you're going to have more people coming and going, where it would make sense to offer, walking as a means, a reliable means of transportation.
I think very few of our subdivisions in the last 10 years have lots above an acre. So that would pretty much include most of them, I would think, which is not saying I think it's a good thing, but that's, how does the board feel about that? I don't have a problem with that one. You like it, Chairman?
I agree with Joe. I think that's a good idea. I know we tried to get sidewalks put in that development down there at Sandy Bottom, but the roads were too narrow. I think is that Mervildine Road?
Yes.
Oh, Old Mill. Yeah, I think that one of the things was that the road was too narrow. But I think it's a good idea to have sidewalks, especially for safety.
Well, I also guess I'm glad Lynn brought that up, because if you read that, it says mandate the inclusion of sidewalks in all new residential subdivisions. So it could be inside the subdivision, or are we talking about along the road also?
I think what they're talking about, and Leanne, I can certainly let you and Angelin talk about this, but I think they just mean more broadly as part of a development project for more intense, or in this particular case, dense development. Leanne?
Yeah, I think it would be dependent on the particular project and the context that it was being developed within, what types of sidewalk connections you're wanting to focus on. I think definitely, I mean, it may make sense to make them internally or not. It just depends on the kind of nature of the site and the project itself, what the uses are. And then the same in terms of adjacency. If it's adjacent to, some protected lands that are never going to develop, it might not make sense to be creating sidewalk connectivity to it. Maybe it's more like a trail situation, or maybe none at all. So I think you're right, Jessica, that this was intended to be more broadly applicable, and the site-specific that probably starts to get a little bit more into the code requirements, so like what specifically you would require for a particular type of project.
And so I'm wondering, Mr. Van Kirk, would it be okay to say mandate the inclusion of sidewalks as part of all new residential development? So you're not being specific. Are we talking about, in between, lots? Are we talking about road frontage? What is it that we're talking about to allow some level of flexibility? I don't know if that's something that seems palatable to you and the other board members, to say mandate the inclusion of sidewalks as part of.
I kind of like that, because then it could be determined. I mean, if people's backyards run up to the road, of course, they're not going to want a sidewalk.
And we wouldn't want.
We wouldn't want that either.
Right.
So, but if it was, the houses were facing the road, we would expect a sidewalk out there adjacent to the road and interior. So I guess that would, the way you said, I think would be expressed much better than just this.
Okay, all right, very good.
And that works on the safety part of it, because if you've got even small developments that don't have a sidewalk, then the kids have to get on the bus, they're gonna walk in the road.
I really like the bet. Any new subdivision would pretty much all interior one would
Well,
have to have
that's
that.
what it Connolly, because
Yeah.
I'm looking at the 2010, and it goes through it pretty good. So we need to stay with that, and that was a big subject over the years, sidewalks
Yep,
and lighting, so,
okay.
Mr. Chairman?
yes, ma'am.
I was thinking too, we're talking about having communities that are walk friendly, where you can walk to different places. So I think it's important that we be very clear when we write this policy, that just like Mr. Van Kirk was saying, if the house faces the road, then we should have a sidewalk on that side. If it backs up, maybe not, but if our goal is to encourage people in the community to walk, then we need to have sidewalks. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Okay. So I think we need to be clear how we word that.
All right, any other questions, thoughts, or ideas related to page 9? Seeing none, then I guess we can move to the top of page 10, rounding it out with the last policy, which, as you can see, does align with Leonardtown's newly updated comprehensive plan, which is to collaborate with the town on a county-wide pedestrian and bikeways master plan. All right, so with that, that brings us to goal number 2. And goal number 2, as you can see, is articulated as a new goal. I'm sure that there are various places in the 2010 plan that prioritizes bicycling as a viable transportation mode, but this one specifically articulates it here. And then, as you can see, there are 3 policies and 3 actions. The first item that is new is policy 1.1, provide end-of-trip support to cyclists, right? So in that particular situation, I think we took that to mean a place for cyclists to park their bike. I'm not necessarily saying a porta potty at every end of trip location, but just making sure that there is a safe place for them to load and unload bikes and change out of clothes, shoes, whatever that may be. Because we also have to remember, while we're talking about biking being a mode of transportation, it's also an important form of recreation. And we are also talking then about older adults and families with young children, and making sure that there's adequate space and lighting in those areas. You'll see that the other 2 policies on page 10 are carry forwards. And that would bring us then to page 11. The top of page 11 indicates a new action item, which is action 2.2.1, emphasizing the importance of official designed standards for bicycle facilities. Leanne, can you share with us any thoughts about this particular item, since it's a new one?
Yeah, and I'll probably defer to Angeline.
Sorry,
since her
yes.
team did a little more focused work on that. She'll probably be able to better respond.
Angeline?
All right, and we're talking about, I'm sorry, I lost you for a second, but the 2.2.1?
Yes.
Okay. So yeah, trying to look at kind of how to create the facilities in kind of a more standard way, so that people are knowing and understanding what they are, what to expect. It's not that you've got to go all the way over here to the east side of the county to get to, like you mentioned, a restroom facility, or you've got to go all the way to the west side or the north side. You've only got parking at certain places. So trying to find ways to really find standards for those, so that people know what to expect and they know where they can go and what there's going to be. So really just looking at kind of creating that consistency.
But what is a bicycle facility? I mean, is it going to be a rest stop with a bathroom and a bike rack? I mean, it seems to be pretty, I'm not sure what it means when it says a bicycle facility.
Question.
Yeah.
What I've seen happen in other communities that have done these design guidelines, I'm thinking of one in Virginia. They have specific requirements built based on the type of road, the kind of the functional classification of the road and the type of development it's supporting that's nearby. So there's some alignment in terms of the density, intensity, type of road, and what type of facility you might provide. So, kind of on your lowest end, you might not really have any facilities. It might be just, a bike path, like in the rural parts of the county. Maybe you have parking if there's a destination. You could have a bike rack, but then as you get into your higher order, more intensive developments, you might have some of those additional facilities. You might have, if you're doing kind of the most intensive, I've seen, and Angela, and you please feel free to jump in on this, but I've seen in more kind of urban type centers, you've got not just parking, but you've actually got kind of almost like bike lockers where you can get them out of the weather under either an overhang or part of a parking deck. They're actually part of that where the cars park, the bikes park too, and they might have some other types of facilities such as showers, et cetera, that might be incorporated as part of new developments. That's probably not something that the county is going to be participating in directly. That would be part of the actual development being built. But again, I think they range from like the most rural situation to the most intensive development situation in terms of the types of facilities you would want to support. And that's a lot based on the frequency of use and the type of user. That's, if someone's commuting to work every day, they're probably going to have more need for facilities than someone who's going for a weekend ride through the countryside. So, Angela, I don't know if there's anything you want to add to.
I think you hit on a lot of it. It's really and truly going to depend on how those areas are being used. And like you said, it's a lot different going for a quick ride in the country versus that more urban kind of cycling. You're using it as your mode of transportation versus more recreational. So I think it can be tailored depending on what you're doing, and maybe connecting also with some of the different cycling groups is usually a good place to go for some of that assistance with, all right, what should it look like in this place, but finding consistency across those.
Well, and those facilities and things wouldn't really make sense to plan for them until you bring us back to page 10, putting together a pedestrian bikeways master plan. I mean, it wouldn't do any good to say, oh, we're going to create some design standards today on what facilities might look like without having a good understanding and good framework for what is it that the community really needs and desires for certain areas.
Mr. Chairman, I have a question. It's, I really have somewhat of an issue with the goal itself because it states promote bicycling as a viable transportation mode. All I can think of is I guess Mr. Mills can answer this, but what is the percentage of of the roads that are absolutely unsafe for bicyclists? Up front on page 6, it mentions Medley's Neck Road, it mentions other roads. I mean, I wouldn't want anybody it's very dangerous. So I think, what would that take to make that an area where people could get to work with a bicycle?
Money.
I mean, are we asking for too much is, I guess, the point. Because for bicycles to be a viable mode of transportation, it can only be right now in areas such as Lexington Park or even Charlotte Hall, maybe somewhat.
Yeah,
Hollywood.
probably your development district, your town centers, your
Right.
villages. That might be where you would focus on bike traffic, being able to accommodate, make the roads so that they could be safely used with bicycles.
Right.
Doing that, I mean, in the easiest thing is to just set the a wider shoulder and just pave that shoulder for the bikes to travel on, and then dedicate it as a bike lane. The other piece of that is it's probably wise to narrow the travel lane of the road if you can do that. All keeping in mind that when you're making that whole footprint bigger, you may have to push the ditches over, you may have to push, and push onto other people's property. So
Right.
that's your other piece that, you gotta think about when you're doing that. And every road is gonna be unique, because it's gonna have its own right-of-way width, whatever's been dedicated already, and then however wide the travel lane is, all those things are gonna play. So it would be hard to give you an answer on, what this would cost for any particular road. You'd have to get into it and compute that. But-
So what if we, Patty, changed the language a little bit for goal number 2, promote bicycling as a viable transportation mode in the growth areas?
You could do that. That, at least, it's not huge. It's feasible.
Right.
I mean, you put it like this, you'll never make it happen.
I'm not sure
you
if you
could.
can really do that, because I don't think, you may not see many on Medley's Neck Road, but come to Sandgate Road, the back road where it's all hilly, the packs of bicycles every weekend, just sit there on a Saturday. Hundreds of them come on that road and you can't get around them, and there's no shoulder.
That's what
There's-
happens on Medley's.
Oh,
Yeah, that's what happens there. So, what I'm saying is, I don't think that there's any law that prohibits bicyclists from going on any road.
But that's recreation. The title is as a viable transportation mode.
Yeah, but
When you're talking recreation, if they want to take their lives in their own hands, that's fine. Kind of not fine, but
but is that true though, that they can ride wherever they want on any road? The bicycle, as far as you know, I think.
It's probably, you treat them just like a vehicle.
Right.
So, similar to motorcyclists, whatever.
Yeah, I see hundreds of them almost every weekend.
Right, yeah.
It's really unbelievable to me that,
they would do it.
because you can't, it's 2 miles or so.
Strength in numbers, though.
Yeah, it's, but.
But the point is, we want this to be a plan that is, that we can execute.
Right, that's
And you
attainable.
cannot execute that the
Sure.
way it's stated.
Sure. So if we added the language in the growth areas, that would help to
That would
Okay,
would
that would
narrow it
address your
down
concern.
somewhat. But there's a focus area.
Sure. Okay.
There's no numbers out there right now anywhere, Donnie, that gives bicycle traffic, how many bikes might travel, let's say, down 235 or anything like that.
not that-
I don't see that many. I think sometimes we're putting too much emphasis on, really going out of the way for bicycle now. As recreation, a lot of people like to use bicycles and stuff, and there are applicable places that would handle that. But I'll just say, like on major roads and things like that, I don't know how much more we could do right now, especially on 235. We have bike lanes and such, but it's still not as safe as you would want it to be. On side roads, it's never going to be, because Medley's Neck Road and your road and Sodley Road have no shoulders, have nowhere to get shoulders. And then, like you were explaining, and if we do, okay, then we have to take the ditches out, and we have to, make the travel lanes a little smaller. On straighter roads, that's not bad. On winding roads like Medley's Neck Road, which was basically a cow path that was paved and has stayed that way forever, you have a narrow lane, you have a large truck, he's going over the line. There's just no way he can, not.
Can I just bring up one point is also we have to think about, this is St. Mary's 2050, so really looking into the future and having things like this in our comprehensive plan can help in the future, especially like with the state of Maryland is really pushing for multimodal transportation. So when we want to go after projects to get state funding for projects, it's helpful to have items like that in your comprehensive plan as like a goal and a policy to help, kind of achieve those funds for projects such as shoulder widening and things of that nature.
And sometimes it can be a road project that you're maybe wanting to relieve some congestion on a road. And if you've got policies that also support what some communities call complete streets, and what that means is basically that your right-of-way accommodates more than just drivers, it accommodates other modes of transportation, that can sometimes give you a leg up in terms of getting access to those state or federal dollars for those projects because you check the box on multimodal.
Okay, well,
But it's got to be scalable.
Yeah, I
I
can.
mean,
can
that's
live
all
with
I'm
that.
saying. You
Sure,
can't,
absolutely.
But, and thinking, thank you for that thought, and thinking that, I mean, doing bicycle paths on the roads we just talked about, that's state and county, big money that would come into that, so, I mean, we can have it in here, but unless those funds are approved, we won't be seeing it.
If I could just jump in for 1 second. I think we're spending a lot of time talking about bicycles and safety, and I'm not saying it's not important, but we do have bicycle lanes already. It's not until page 19 that we even start to talk about the Amish community. And I think that if we're going to invest some money, they are also an integral part of this community. And safety is a big issue with those horses, and the fact that they have to assimilate with our cars. So if we're going to spend a lot of time on bicycles, I think we need to really look at that part, because we're looking for space and land. Where are we going to put these bicycle racks and things? Where we probably need to think about where we're going to put some bus stops that are safe for the Amish to be able to access public transit, which they do use. We even have children on school buses. I just want to throw that in.
excellent, excellent. It is, it's a good point.
Okay. Well, it's coming up.
All right. Still good with making that change in the growth areas. Courtney, do you think that'll give us enough leverage? I mean, I know we can't look into the future and say, oh, well, there are going to be 14 grant opportunities. It'll, between now and 2050, but hopefully that language will serve as a basis for future applications, should those monies become available.
Okay.
So then that, we're back to page 10. I'm sorry, I think I actually moved us on to 11. I apologize.
Yeah.
So there are some minor changes that were made with the other action items, but really I think we're probably good to move to goal number 3, which is achieving full transportation system connectivity. And I think that's something that Courtney was referencing earlier with MPO studies and things of that nature. The policy and action items there are also new. I don't know if there are any questions about those items. We're talking about policy 3.1, ensure site design enhances the transportation network, and what that might look like. Certainly would require further study, but this just kind of lays the foundation for those kinds of ideas moving forward. And then action 3.1 also being new, incorporate interparcel connections. We know that's something that is a preference stated in our subdivision regulations, but here you see it popping up specifically as an action item, or continuing to be an action item moving forward. So unless there are any questions or concerns about that, I can move us to policy 3.2 at the top of page 12, and as you can see, that also is indicated to be a new policy, mandate new development to provide safe routes connecting to surrounding amenities. And
How
even
do
though
we do that?
by waving our magic wands. And in the alternative, certainly providing the idea of a master plan to talk about what routes are available. I would suspect that there would need to be some studies sort of analyzing, and I am not an engineer here and I don't pretend to be, but understanding what the speed limits are, what the roads have been engineered to be able to handle, and then figuring out whether there are places where we could improve public safety for certain aspects of community life. Donnie, I don't know if you have any thoughts on this one also being a new policy. Angeline, if you could maybe lend your voice to this and what you're seeing in other jurisdictions where you've worked.
Yeah, so I think you kind of hit on it a little bit, looking a little bit more holistically and trying to find ways and spaces where we can connect new developments to existing developments, but also, trying to connect the new developments as they're coming in. And I think some of these are kind of blending into each other where it's about that connection and trying to find ways, if you start to look at, no, I think it was the one before it, but trying to find ways to make those connections where I think Leanne was talking about it earlier, where you don't have to use the car. You don't have to get out on the main roads. You can find these alternatives and safely connect to, your neighborhood to the parks, or your neighborhood to a school, or the existing development somewhere to those other developments, so that we're kind of providing that different option to some of that congested area.
It seems like 3.1 and 3.11 kind of say the same thing as 3.2. I mean, almost doesn't use the words inter parcel connection in 3.2, but I mean, it says provide safe alternative access routes. I mean, they're not going to build a road parallel to 235 to get to another site. It doesn't, I would think it's talking about inter parcel connectors or driveways along the, which is more of an inter parcel, but that's, seems to be almost the same thing.
Well, yeah, especially when you're talking about in, the development districts where you're going to want, ways to sort of get around, whether it's an accident or just a lot of congestion in one area, certainly would be the preference. One of the concerns that I'm seeing here, though, with a comprehensive plan, these are, broad policy statements where they identify some things that should be explored, and, kind of understand what the implementation might look like. And Mr. Van Kirk's raised a couple of really great questions about, sort of what would that look like. I am a little concerned about the strong language in some of these, and since we're just talking about policy 3.2, mandating that new developments provide safe alternative access routes. Again, we do have to take into account the importance of attainable housing, and every time there's the word mandate, that comes with a dollar amount. Certainly, something to consider if there's an alternative to that word, whether it's explore, opportunities for development to provide some of these alternatives. But I am concerned about the strong wording here. I don't know if the Planning Commission members have any thoughts about that, but it's just something that I feel like we should bring up in this setting.
I like the word mandate in sidewalks that we talked about, but
Okay.
here, it's almost like saying that a new development would have to have an alternative access route connecting to neighborhood schools. You know, like you say, I don't think it's appropriate here to me in this particular setting, but it's,
Okay?
My concern is, without having the word mandate in there, they're going to explore it, they're going to see it's going to cost money, and then they're not going to do it. You know, they're in the business of making money, and a developer is going to check the box and then they don't have to do it, so they're not going to. When you're talking about safe routes and children and people walking dogs and using the area, I feel personally that it should be mandatory. You're talking about citizens of St. Mary's County safety.
and I agree with that mostly, with the exception of, I wrote the word how here the other day when I did it. I don't see how. I mean, I like when we tell developers what they have to do, you know, as, whether it's yourself as an administrative action or the boards. I don't have any problem with that. But in this case, I don't know, that would almost make every new development provide an alternate access route. I don't know how that could even be accomplished in this particular one policy. But that's,
One thing that might be helpful, I think this goal, when it talks about full transportation system connectivity, it talks about, you know, it's talking about all travel modes. So, for example, in the way it's stated in 3.2, connecting to adjacent neighborhood schools and activity centers, it may be that it's a smaller road that connects, but it more likely is probably a different mode that would be creating those connections, a sidewalk, a trail, some kind of path, maybe a bike lane, or a purpose kind of shared path. So I think the point is trying to create opportunities for multimodal access. The more we can create those for people so that they don't have to get in their car and drive to a park to be able to walk their dog or stroll their stroller, if you let them have access to that so that they can literally walk out of their house, walk down the road and connect to a path, that's going to remove cars from the road, the more accessibility you create that. So I think that's the intention here, is just trying to create those connections as much as possible. And it doesn't, I don't think, maybe what we need to clarify is it's not meaning roads everywhere.
Well,
That
then
might
we need
not
to
be
put
the
that,
connection.
we need to put
Yeah.
that verbiage in there, put those examples you just gave.
but if you leave this like this, it says developments provide. It doesn't say they may provide or they could provide. It says they mandate to provide a safe and alternative access route. So there's no question that if a park is 200 feet away, they can't drive out on the road from that development and go to it. By this, they would have to construct something somewhere to get to that park. I mean, what if it's through other people's property and stuff? I think this,
Well, I think it might be a crosswalk, for example, like if it's safe to put a crosswalk and maybe some signage there, I think that may kind of check that box.
Good afternoon, Mr. Hauser. How you
I
doing?
popped up here, if I could just take 20 seconds
Be
just
glad
to
to
lend
see
some
you.
context and credence to Ms. Andritz's concerns. And I think, Mr. Lawford, it's something we touched on earlier, the first work session with Ms. Phileas, where we got into the percentage of income that was going to qualify for affordable housing. There's discussion then over, do we commit to a given number or not? And the explanation, and whatever the Planning Commission recommendation wants to make, you can. If you want to go with the word mandate, that's absolutely the Planning Commission's right to say that's what should be in here. But just keep in mind that committing yourself to a particular language or position right now it's not as easy to undo that or find flexibility in circumstances down the road. And that might be intentional or not, but I get it. The issue with a word like mandatory is that it is directory. That is a shall, that is literally mandatory language, and that doesn't get, when it would come time to write development regulations on this, a lot of flexibility to deviate from that, even in reasonable circumstances. And if we down the line did decide that that was too harsh or too stringent a standard in this or any other thing that might come up in the future as we do it, amending the comprehensive plan is a lot more of a lift than a simple zoning text amendment, because you don't have to go through this full process, but you at a minimum have to prepare the amendment to the comprehensive plan, have to submit that to MDP, have to submit that to your neighboring jurisdictions, have to give all of them 60 days to comment, take it in front of public hearings before the Planning Commission, get them to make a recommendation to the commissioners, make the commissioners take it to a public hearing, wait for that, and then ultimately they decide whether or not to grant an amendment for a comprehensive plan, which is ultimately, if you needed a situation where you did have to deviate from the black and white of kind of a prescriptive element of the comp plan, that is what you have to do, because the development regulations and the CZA that come out of this have to be in conformity with the comprehensive plan. So slightly watered down language, like instead of, mandate that new developments provide safe alternative access to, and I do understand the concern of what does it actually mean when you give in flexibility, but if you turn it to language like should or encourage or prioritize, things that are a little less black and white, just does give you a little bit more of a wiggle room there, so you're not quite locked into one particular policy choice at this moment in time and for the next 10 years thereafter.
Makes perfect sense.
Returning to my chair.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Okay. Anybody want to suggest how they want that worded?
Based on the explanation we just received, I would retract what I said and go back to explore.
Connor, how about require? It's not mandate, but require. I mean, I think you're right. I agree with Connor that a developer is going to find every loophole and do it the minimum requirement. They're not going to do that extra yard, and I think, and this, I may be reading this a little wrong, but I think developments should have more than one way in and one way out. And I know there's a couple in this county that have one way in and one way out. And if there's an accident, those people inside are stuck. So I do think alternate routes for safety is also something that should be considered.
But some of that is based upon how many houses are within that subdivision, what the comprehensive zoning ordinance requires. I think I don't know if 75 sticks in my mind. If it's less than 75, then only one is required. And like I say, I'm a mandate person. I don't have a problem with words like mandate within zoning ordinances or the comp plan, but I don't know how this could be accomplished in every particular new subdivision. I mean, it may be able to happen in some of them, but if you take one that backs up to protected property or other people's property, saying that they have to put some sort of trail or path or pathway through that to get to the recreational area, it seemed like that would almost be impossible.
Well, it could prove from an engineering perspective to be difficult. Where things are difficult, I think that that's just a euphemism for expensive. And, having done, land use and zoning work for almost 2 decades, I will tell you, I've seen communities and jurisdictions come full circle on connectivity and trails, because everybody says, oh, we want hiker-biker paths. And in the midst of COVID, that seemed like a really great idea. But then as people were, getting back to work, back to school, there wasn't, the watchful eye of, the neighborhood watch. And all of a sudden, those amenities that seemed so great, 5-6 years ago, now turn into potential safety hazards. We're worried about what goes on the trails. Is somebody safe walking their dog? Because, oh yes, we forgot to also include lighting, running Smecco lines, that ain't cheap. So in order to make the areas safe, when you're first constructing them can be challenging, and then maintaining them. And if we're talking about a subdivision with a traditional HOA, if we're talking about making home ownership something that is a priority in the county, we know that that's certainly a way for somebody to build individual and family wealth. Once you tack on HOA fees and stuff like that to maintain these areas, it all just becomes expensive. And if one of the main goals of the comprehensive plan, as it relates to housing, is to have attainable housing, I am concerned, that words like mandate are going to sound expensive. Now that we've talked in the past, and I'm sure we'll talk about this when we get to the growth management section later on. But you can put together sort of a menu of options, right? So if you're, talking about certain many, lots or certain size lots or a certain density, specific zoning districts provide, maybe you create an incentive. We want more of this and we'll be willing to give you, let's just say, increased density or something like that. So there are ways to encourage these things, because I think what I'm hearing is that, and I live here too, value in creating safe spaces for people to be able to get back and forth, but just being mindful of the concerns that Mr. Hauser expressed, maybe finding a way to, I'm going to say, walk back the language, but create some options as we move forward into the implementation, which certainly would be the CZO.
How about if we put new development should
Is encouraged to provide.
explore safe routes connecting to surrounding amenities? Because then when we get a bigger project, and I'm just making up a project now, we got another big project coming up on Willis Road, so we know that they're going to need, when you have the bigger development, I think it's easier for them to explore and afford a second route out. Like you say, we have smaller ones, and that's really all they need, so don't want to nail it all down with one, but something like that.
Yeah, I think that whole, I think it needs to be reworded between, maybe you guys and Leanne can figure out some rewording that entire paragraph that would, like Chairman said, and like Connor both said, that would not just let the developer say, oh, it says that word should, so I'm going to should not look at this. I think it needs to have something in there. I think it needs to have something in there that the
Provide a safe
developer,
route connecting to surrounding amenities.
Hey, Lynn,
Are the words "where feasible" enough to provide some clarity that it's not expected everywhere, but it would be expected in places where it's reasonable to expect it?
I would like words that would let the developer look at it, and even if they said, oh, we can't do it, when it came to the board, it would be something, if we said, hey, there's plenty of property there or plenty of access that could be done. It may cost you a little bit of money, but I would like something done with that where it wouldn't strictly say you could if you wanted to. I don't know how to do that, but I would like to reword and re-explore this.
I personally like the word encourage. We could encourage it, and then based on that, we could encourage them with incentives, like you were saying, or something along those lines, to make it beneficial for them to actually act upon it.
This out, mandate new development to provide,
That's what I said.
and just say provide safe routes connecting.
Lynn, go on mute.
Oh. Sorry.
All right. So
Mr. Hauser?
I was just going to throw out a sentence. How about new development shall provide safe access routes, including alternate routes when necessary, connecting to adjacent neighborhoods, schools, and activity centers? That satisfy people?
when necessary or feasible?
Either or. I think that could go. That could move us on.
I think that can move us on because it wouldn't just be for them to decide it's feasible. It would also come to us who would say, well, to us that it's feasible to do an alternate route. So I like
Right.
that.
That
myself,
underlines that there's a minimum floor kind of requirement that access has to be safe, and then, contemplates the possibility that alternate routes may not always be viable or required to achieve that for lower development.
And I'll probably get a tomato thrown at me at one of the next meetings or something, but developers, I know everybody has to make money, but we also have to make things safe. So, and we've gone over that with them, and we've had developers that have really, I'll say, turned their ear to us and made those corrections in their development, and they'll have a better development for it. So maybe, I like the wording you used.
All right. So I've made a note of that, and we will go back in the tape at 3:25 PM. Thank you, Mr. Hauser. All right. So then moving us forward, we have policy 3.3, which is also a new policy, coordinate with adjacent counties to maintain consistent transportation facilities. And you can see the various action items there. Some of them are new, and some of them are carry over from the current plan. A lot of these are, kind of forward leaning that involve, studying and, considering, exploring, and all of those things. But just starting to have the conversation is the thrust behind policy 3.3. Are there any questions or concerns about that policy and the 4 action items that are listed there?
Mr. Chairman, I have a couple questions. Okay. 332, I think that might be a bit controversial. It reminds me of the housing developments in Clinton where people, before you get to Clinton, where people go through all these developments to get around going 301, going back up 301.
Mm-hmm.
That's what I envision. And I wouldn't think that property owners would care much for that. Although it is a quicker way to get.
To staying off of 301?
Yeah.
Yeah, and I'm going to say traditional land planning theories and policies would certainly keep cars off of, a main highway, and having those highways, certainly with increased rate of speed, be for folks that are commuting far distances, and keeping, the local traffic local. So your concern is over the language in action 3.3.2, correct?
Yeah, because what they're saying is that they want the site designs that don't create barriers. Like they're encouraging people to go through those developments. And it sounded to me like they were, encouraging the speed bumps and that kind of thing.
Well, I don't know about the speed bump. Certainly, I know that fire, EMS, and our sheriff's office might have a few thoughts about speed bumps, and speed tables, because that certainly increases their response time. Is there some language that you would like to see in there instead, or are you suggesting to strike the language altogether?
I just feel like it's very controversial. I mean, if I lived in a community like that, I wouldn't want it to be a route for
Through traffic?
through traffic to
Or you could-
avoid going on the main roads.
Could you almost take vehicles out and leave bicycles and pedestrians that may, connect to a
That would be
subdivision?
different.
Because
Yeah,
we have another section a little further back that talked about the inter parcel
right.
connections that, if applicable, could be used for an adjacent, something here, something here. If they have land that connects, I guess that's what adjacent is. It would, could have something like that, but I understand what you're saying. And I don't think we've had that down here, I think.
We did have discussions on that, and
Yeah.
it
We've had it.
caused an uproar.
Isn't that the main reason why, it's the road across from Old Rolling
Yeah, that's exactly.
by Crapper Barrel that was never connected to Route 4?
Yeah.
Because there was so much controversy over people
Right.
cutting through there to get to Route 4. It was dead-ended right there.
Right.
And there's some other roads that,
Shady Mile.
yes.
That's
Oh,
it.
that's
Shady
right.
Mile Drive.
I'm looking at the language. So prohibit site designs that create barriers between adjacent developments, and instead encourage connections for vehicles, bicycles, and pedestrians where it is safe to do so. Because maybe it's
Is it ever going to
safe.
be safe if you keep vehicles in there? I mean, honestly. With children, and I mean, developments have lots of children.
Just looking, I'm not sure that it's specifically, though, for residential development. We're talking about all development, so we could be talking about commercial as well. And if I'm just gonna say, if I'm a small business, I want as much foot and vehicular traffic as I can possibly muster. But it depends on, you know, what the priorities are.
It doesn't say commercial.
Correct, it doesn't, yeah, it doesn't say either. So do you think it's worth,
I think we ought to take it, in goal 2, policy 2.2, apply community design principles to create safe environments for bicyclists. When you talk about people going to and from, you know, that more or less gives apply excellent community design principles to all new construction and redevelopment to create a safe, accessible, and integrated environment for bicyclists. And I guess that, with that, you could put bicyclists and pedestrians, and then take this out where it says vehicles, because you don't want vehicles going between the, is that what you, is that?
is that what you're getting at?
Yeah.
Okay.
So if we took that action 3.3.2, just take it out. We already adjusted in a
Okay.
past goal.
Fine with me.
How y'all feel about that?
Sounds good.
Well, I already put an X through it, so I hope it's okay. All
My
right.
last question, wait a minute, I have one more question, and that is, what do we mean by access policies for key state roads such as St. Andrews and Point Lookout? What exactly are they trying to say?
How cars get in and out from other areas and other projects, so how you get into, where you cut into a particular roadway. But I'm
Would an
sorry, you have
example be-
acting director Mills here.
Yeah.
Is that what it means? I
Yeah,
don't-
well, Leanne was getting ready to chime in. She can say what she was going to say.
And you tell me if I'm not interpreting this correctly, but typically when we're talking about access management, we're talking about managing the number of driveways off of kind of major corridors that are meant to move traffic. So definitely on arterial roads, maybe even on collector, it just kind of depends on what your standards are. But you know, the more driveways you have, the more kind of in and out of traffic you've got, the more potential, the slowdown of the vehicles on the road, and also the greater potential for having some kind of crash or issue. So the more you can have one driveway that can serve many developments, and you might even create kind of a park once environment potentially, or at least driving in and kind of shared access across a service road or something like that, so that you're not trying to, you know, if you've got to get from one shopping center to another, you don't have to get out on the main road, go down and cut back up again. You can actually access it internally to the development. That's typically what we're talking about when we talk about access management.
So the tricky thing is going to be here, though, with this language, is preparing and implement a highway access policy for key state roads. I'm not sure that we can actually do that. And I think this was one of the things that Courtney and I had flagged to share with the consultant offline, but because we're trying to keep this particular draft of things moving forward, it is printed here, but that was something that we had flagged for discussion with the consultant.
So one thing that I'll share, and I am not the expert on Maryland DOT, so take this with a grain of salt, but we've definitely worked with other communities to, for them to kind of use their influential power, so they don't have direct authority over what happens on those roads and the design of those roads, but they have influential power, and you do, you know, have a seat at the table in terms of your MPO and that sort of thing, where some of these decisions are made. And so, you know, some communities have been able to, even on roads that are within another jurisdiction, have you know, a say in terms of how they're designed. So I'll just kind of put that out there. You know, there is a role, I think, for the county to be at least in those conversations. You're right, you don't have the authority to dictate, but there might be more of a role that you can take in having an influence on how those areas are designed.
Jessica, quick question. I mean, this policy or some form of it has already been in the comp plan for years.
Correct.
Why are they redoing it to exclude Three Notch Road? Do they just want to put as many driveways as they can on Three Notch Road? Is that the only change? I don't understand that.
I can't really answer that other than to say it was including, but perhaps not limited to. But we can also, I don't think that was intentional to leave Three Notch Road out of the mix here.
Is that the only change to it? I mean, I don't have it verbatim of what the 2010 plan says about. I mean, there is something in there about limiting access to, I know it says Point Lookout and Three Notch. I don't know about Budds Creek Road and St. Andrews Church Road, but it does say Point Lookout and Three Notch. I mean, there's been something in there for years about that, but this would take out Three Notch.
And I don't think that was intentional. Leanne?
Yeah, I'm going to have to defer to Angeline on this one. I'm not sure, I don't recall why that was excluded from the original policy or the original action.
Yeah, that was my one question, was why just those roads, you know, that are listed there?
I don't think the intent was necessarily to exclude Three Notched Road so much as to say that maybe these particular roads are the ones that have had the most kind of concern from an access perspective, which is kind of where you get that including these roads, but we can certainly make sure that Three Notch is specifically
Well, no, it says.
dictated in there as well.
So Angeline, I'm sorry to interrupt you, but I, at least on the version that I'm holding, I do have a footnote here that says it modifies a current policy to do one specific thing, which is to exclude
Right.
Three Notch Road. So if we can go back, if y'all can go back and look at that one, and let's figure out what's
Yeah, we'll
going
go
on. Well, we can move forward, but
verify.
I think it's something that does need, that bears discussion and follow up on that one, please. Okay. Anything else for page 12? Okay, then on we go to page 13. You'll see that the first action item at the top is just a carry forward, but moving on to goal number 4, you'll see that this is a new one, secure long-range funding and multimodal system viability. And I think this gets into at least part of the concept that Courtney was mentioning early on, which is the comprehensive plan should provide some sort of framework, lay some sort of foundation with some broad sweeping, policies and goals that would increase our chances of successfully obtaining grants for future studies and improvement. So I think that's what this is intended to do. And as you can see, there's been some modifications to some of the current policies and goal, but there are, of course, the new goal and a couple of new action items. Any questions on any of those? Well, alrighty. That would then bring us along to the top of page 14. Sorry, and there was also a carryover of policy 4.3. But moving on then to goal number 5, integrating trails and pathways into community development, new goal, and a couple of new policy items. And then you'll see some carry forward of a couple of other policies from the current plan. You'll see there isn't the prescriptive language in any of these, but more just they consider and incorporate until we get to the bottom page, I'm sorry, action 5.2.2. But as you can see, that's a carry forward from a current policy.
Jessica, who sets the pay a fee in lieu?
Well, I would argue it would be the commissioners because it certainly is not me. Donnie, do you happen to know?
Not
which
for the
department?
not for the trail.
Okay. But we can certainly look into that.
Just curious.
Yeah. All right. And that brings us to page 15 with a new action item that I think is really kind of a repeat of many of the things that we've been talking about. And then policy 5.3, to the extent that lighting can be provided, exploring SMECA, what those opportunities and options might be, but again, certainly not mandatory language there. So that would then bring us, my goodness, to page 16, where we actually start to talk about the roads. And so you'll see that there are, on the top of page 16, a new goal, concentrate development to preserve regional highway capacity. That's a new item, but probably echoes the sentiment of what's currently in our plan. Angeline, any thought about and any information you wish to share with the Planning Commission regarding Goal 6?
I think that the primary thing there was listening to some of the feedback that we got and making sure that we're trying to find ways to really work with what the capacities are in the area and kind of work with them and try not to overload the communities or the community roads and those main corridors. So I think that's the primary functionality there.
Is an example of that, the FDR Boulevard, which helps offload some of the traffic on 235? Is that the idea behind those?
Yes.
I mean, is this talking about strategically guide all new development, or is it talking about commercial development and subdivisions and stuff to the designated growth areas? Because, I mean,
All development, I believe, because when you think about your, I'm sorry to interrupt, because when you think about your growth areas, you're not only talking about residential, but you are talking about, commercial development as well. All right, so are there any questions or concerns regarding the first 4 policies that we see on page 16?
I don't much like policy 6.3.
Okay.
It says limit transportation improvements. I mean, just because we fix a road doesn't mean we're going to build a bunch of houses on it. So, I mean, there's a lot of, and I'll just take, for instance, Medley's Neck Road. They could use a good pickup and snap it straight, but it's not going, but I just think limiting transportation improvements anywhere is, I just don't like the verbiage of it.
Yeah.
I think, and Angeline, tell me if I'm right about this, maybe a better way to state this would have been expanding capacity, because I think the point is that you're not wanting to create new capacity that that suggests support for new development in those areas.
In the rural
Is that-
areas.
Yeah, does that read better?
If you could come up with something that might read a little bit better, just, that to me tells me they want to limit transportation improvements, so. I mean,
Right, it's-
anytime, just even if they put millings on the side of a road so you don't run down into a rut, that to me, it's saying don't do that,
Right, and I think that's not the intent, if there's something about a road that's unsafe in a rural area, it should be fixed. It's that we don't want to induce traffic or suggest an area is appropriate for new development because we're expanding capacity. I think that's the intent. Is that, Angelin's nodding her head, so maybe if we,
Can we just scrap it?
I've got, my question is if we're focusing our development to the growth areas, then I feel like we don't need policy 6.3.
So you and I were traveling on that same
Yeah,
wavelength.
I think that, we're focusing that growth to the growth areas. And obviously the rural areas are not the growth areas. So like Mr. Chairman said, if you need to throw some millings down on the road or something like that to maintain it, you should be able to do so.
okay. So it sounds like we want to delete policy 6.3.
Yes,
yes, please.
Okay.
Everybody all right with that?
Yep.
very
Okay.
good. All right, so that would move us then and to the top of page 17, where you'll see various action items that go along with the policy 6.4 from the previous page, which is continue planning for critical corridors. And this is where we do include specifically Three Notch Road and FDR Boulevard. So any questions or concerns with the language in these action items? There are 5.
Oh, that's probably why they took Three Notch Road out, 66644. Joe?
Yeah.
Because it's.
They stuck it
put-
here.
Yeah.
But of course, again, we get back to that language of, is it really up to us to prepare and implement highway access for a road that is not ours?
Correct.
So we'll go back and massage that language, but other than that,
I agree that we should at least be able to influence what the state does to our roads down here as far as connectivities and stuff that was stated
I would love
earlier.
to be able to do that as well.
Somehow.
All right, so Mr. Chair, if there's no other questions, then we can move on to goal 20, goal 7 of, I think, 23 or something or other here. Yep, goal 7 of 23 at breakneck speed. Create a safe, efficient, and integrated roadway system. I think we can all agree that that's something important. I think it articulates and sort of probably repackages some of the language that comes from our current comprehensive plan and common sense. You'll see that we have 3 policy items here, and policy 7.3 includes 3 action items that have been massaged a little bit. Any questions or concerns with that language there? All right.
No comments, go ahead.
Then here we go to goal 8 of 23. Enhance roadway safety for all users and cultural contexts. So this is where you see some very explicit recognition of our Amish and Mennonite community here. You'll see that there are 3 policy items and couple of action items as well, as we're talking about how to safely share the roads with those communities. Any questions or concerns about anything there? All right. Goal number 9.
Hold on, Jessica, I'm sorry.
Oh, yes,
I wasn't quick enough. On 8, back to goal 8, 8.3.1, initiate improvements to enhance safety and reduce conflicts. Would that be like, to provide pull-off spaces for buses?
Certainly could include that.
Yeah, I just was wondering if that's where that would be. Because they, right now, the STS buses have to stop right on the edge of the road, like on, going north on 5, especially in Charlotte Hall. So,
Certainly
I
could
just
include
wanna-
those things, yes. Yep,
Okay, thanks.
you got it. All right, Mr. Chair, then on to goal 9. Manage roadway access to improve traffic flow and safety.
Jessica, let's touch on 8.3.3 for a second.
Yes,
What is- Who would actually do that? Would it be a combination between DPW and State Highway to upgrade and downgrade, or recommend upgrade and downgrade? And what would that do, as far as development? What would that mean to us, Donnie, if something was downgraded or upgraded?
Well, for the road classification, it has components that it could be affecting the properties through the CZO, buffer setbacks or something like that,
Okay.
So if you had a road at a certain road classification and you dropped it, then it could affect those, maybe even the building restriction line too. So that's what that would do. So we haven't based, in general, we haven't based on the ADTs that are on that road. There are a few outliers that were an older segment of road that are classified higher, and we've left them, because of the component with the, not only, but because of the component with the zoning, you could make something non-conform.
Okay, I'm just curious as to what would happen to certain roads, the implications.
All right. Then moving on to goal number 9, managing roadway access to improve traffic flow and safety. Any questions? Pretty short and brief here, but are there any questions or concerns about any of the language here? Okay.
I think my concern with this, I've just seen it from a professional end, is when you have joint use access driveways, 9 times out of 10, you're being asked for a road maintenance agreement. So I don't know if that would be addressed here or in a permitting process or what, but,
It's addressed at the permitting
okay.
process.
So, I mean, my recommendation would be just, that would be something to take into account, that anyone that shares a driveway has some kind of road maintenance agreement for later on down the road.
Yes, and it is required. All right, so then that moves us on to goal 10 of 23. And as you'll see, this one is a new one. Promote resilient infrastructure and environmental stewardship. And so this begins to touch on some of the conversations that we had before the Thanksgiving break. But you'll see that there are a handful of, a handful of policies and action items. And I think this gets certainly at where we want to direct growth, but also the acknowledgement that storms, they are coming, and trying to address systems that are already in place and planning for the future. I think that's basically the thrust behind goal 10. Are there any questions, concerns, or proposed changes to the information on pages 21 and the top of page 22?
I'm just assuming that this will address the roads that typically flood. The Leonard, Newtown Neck Road, Flatiron Road around, down towards Bubby's Place. There's roads around the county that sit underwater during the bad storm. So this would be addressing that.
Yes.
So they're also listed on the nuisance flood plan.
Oh, okay,
That was recently
great.
through to the commissioners. Those roads that you mentioned.
Thank you.
All right. Then that moves us to an entirely different topic. Transit. So that brings us to the top of page 23, and you'll see this new goal, but you'll see that nothing earth-shattering about it. The note at the bottom says it's a new goal, but simply there to reorganize the existing policies and objectives, because you will see that all of the language on page 23 in some form or fashion is carry forward from existing policies and objectives from the current plan, and it carries us on through to the top of page 24 as well. All of those are carry forwards. Any questions or concerns about those? Seeing none, then that would take us to goal 12, expand transit services to meet growing regional demand. And you'll see that the information that is presented then on the remainder of page 24, again, all carry forwards, and bringing us to page 25, about halfway down, you'll see that there's only one item which is new. The rest of them are carry forwards, and the one item is new is policy 12.2, encourage transit use for broader community benefits, and this kind of touches upon the importance of broader community health, as we talked last time. So I don't know if there are any questions, concerns, or suggested changes to any of those items.
Goal 13.
All right. Goal 13, ensure transportation access for vulnerable populations. This is a new goal, but as you can see, most of the items underneath that goal are carry forwards from current policies. Just serving as a reminder that we need to consider all aspects of our community, and not just, folks that are like us. Any questions, concerns, or changes for anything relating to goal 13? All right. If none, then that would move us to goal 14, establish effective and collaborative transit management. And you'll see that some of these are new policies, but I'm feeling like our Department of Public Works and Transportation already does many of these things.
I was going to ask that. The way it reads is that it doesn't exist today.
I'm sorry, what?
I said the way it reads, it is as if there is no professional organization that manages and plans for this.
I think, if I recall, Donnie, there's been discussions in the past about whether it should stay in Public Works.
Well,
Transit, the bus,
I mean, it's growing all the time,
Yeah.
That side of DPW&T is growing all the time. I mean, it would take a reorg and all kinds of
Right.
things to do that, but, it might be that at some point, transportation sets on its own as a department.
I thought
But-
that was discussed.
But that would go in front of the commissioners and all that.
So, Angelin, because this is written as a new goal, can you give us some sort of background on where this came from?
I think it was really trying to look at taking what exists and sort of building on it. I don't think it was really intended as kind of I understand where that perspective comes from. In looking back at it, it does kind of read as though it doesn't currently exist. So we can certainly look at ways to kind of massage that language to really kind of shift the verbiage from this doesn't exist and should to more of that, making sure that we're building on what does exist as it's growing to really expand those things and make sure that, you know, like in that goal, that those management roles are kind of explicitly dedicated, and that stakeholder collaboration is happening. So we can look at ways to shift that a little bit to really not imply that it doesn't exist, but really get at more of that building on what does exist to take it into that growth period and into that future.
Yeah. I think I would prefer that, because I would be sitting here if I were transportation and going, you just insulted me, that we're not professionals. Sorry, but, you know, when I was reading it, it was like, oh, what's the problem?
Yes, we can certainly kind of shift that around and massage it to where it's not, the implication doesn't lean directly toward these aren't happening, but let's make sure as we grow and as it's expanding that these things are continuing to happen and that things are in place to help those continue.
Yeah, and maybe one day we would need it, but the question would be, do we need it?
Yeah, and I'd like to point out too that the transportation plan has components of transit in it, as well as roads and what the network should be, long-range projects, short-range projects. All that's in the transportation plan, which I think this board heard that maybe summer or something. And it's set now to go in front of the commissioners. It had its public hearing, all that on the transportation plan. So it's nearing final approval.
So we should make sure we're consistent with that.
Yeah.
Yes, and
I use that in prepping
Right,
for this too, to
Yes.
just see if it kind of made sense.
right.
Yeah, a draft of the transportation plan was forwarded to the consultant before we started. All right, so any then questions or concerns, or can I move us to goal 15 at the top of page?
I just had a quick one. I wasn't sure. Mobile management, action 1431.
Yeah, supposedly that's a carryover from a current policy.
What is it? Mobile management.
I was thinking about that. Cell phone.
Cell phone management.
I'll be honest with you, I really
That's what I was-
don't know where this comes from. Donnie, do you?
I don't know exactly where it's coming from, but I took that more as what is going on with our planning our routes, all of those things that we've done, and it's already developed. There is, those routes are on the GIS map, I believe, and there's an app now for tracking the buses to know the arrival time when it might be where you
I
are.
bet that's what it is.
So do you think maybe
so-
we should delete that action item because the work has been
Well, and the other.
completed and ongoing?
Well, and the other side of that is we're continuing to try to improve, you know, we're trying to make it better. You know, we're trying to make sure that all of our routes are covered. That's, you know, I mean, and all those things play. So we have, you have funding things, you have staffing levels, you have number of buses available, there's a lot. So all those things are weighed, and we try to make sure that we're able to cover the routes and inform the, you know, riders that the bus should be where you are at a certain time. Now, that, you know, it's kind of all digital, so it's all, if you don't have a cell phone, I guess you really can't figure that out.
Right.
But But, you know, somebody could call, I mean, if they wanted to, they could call the dispatch office and then they could they could give them the information telling them, you know. But again, you're on a landline somewhere, so you might not be at the bus stop at the time, but, you know, that's what could potentially happen.
So I'm wondering if the action items that are listed on page 27 are a little outdated when you take into consideration then goal 15, and I'm sorry to be jumping ahead here, but goal 15 seems to touch on the things that talk about current capability and, you know, future leaning technology. So I'm wondering if maybe policy 14.3 and the 3 action items can actually be removed.
Put an X through it.
Okay, so there's one vote. Any concerns about doing that?
Sorry.
Yeah, well, goal 15 is new, so it looks like it incorporates the actions of 14. Order and expert collaboration.
Okay, so then looking at goal 15, increase ridership through strategic outreach and service improvement, which is all these things that Mr. Mills just spoke about.
Yeah.
And a couple more.
Yeah, the only difference here, it looks like, is that we're saying we would use transportation consultants specifically called out in goal 14, but that doesn't mean when you look at goal 15, even though it doesn't specifically say it, that you wouldn't use it if needed.
Sure.
And we did use a consultant for the transportation plan update, as well as the nuisance flood plan. So,
All right, so if there are no questions or concerns, that takes us to goal 16 on the top of.
Jessica, what do you ended up doing with 14 and 15? I think I missed what you said you were going to do.
For policy 14.3, I've put an X through it.
Okay. All of 14.3?
Yes, sir.
Okey dokey.
All right, so that brings us to water access. Something that ought to be near and dear to all of our hearts, considering we're a peninsula surrounded by water on all 3 sides. So that brings us to goal 16, leverage potential passenger ferry to drive economic growth and tourism. And I believe this what came primarily from our economic development professionals. And so if you want, what we can do is kind of put a pin in these items and wait until our next meeting when DED will be present, so we can go over that. Does that sound like a plan?
Fine.
Yeah, I'd love to hear specifics on that one.
Sure.
I think it's good.
I think it'd be great.
and if that gets added to the department, Public Works and Transportation, that's just another thing, another piece
That's right.
that gets even bigger on the transportation side.
Right.
What was studied before was found to be very expensive.
A couple times, I think it was studied
It has been.
over the years.
Yeah.
All right. So that would take us to the top of page 33. Our base and county regional airport. So goal 19, as you can see, is a new goal, but certainly not anything that's new to us living in the county. Protect airport navigational safety and airspace integrity. And you'll see that there is a policy item here and one action item. And the policy carries through. And the action item is something that I think is already taken care of through our comprehensive zoning ordinance. Yep, it does. Through our AQs. That kind of then transitions us nicely into goal 20, which is ensuring compatible land use through effective airport zoning.
Jessica, the
Yes.
existing airport has an AQ's zone defined?
I'm sorry?
Our little airport has an AQ's zone defined?
AE overlay
Yeah.
is what it is for
AE,
our
Yeah, sorry.
AEO?
AE overlay.
And is that, that's short for airport environs, right?
That's right.
Yep. All right, and yeah, I was going to say, and that kind of leads us then into goal number 20, ensuring compatible land use through effective airport zoning. And you'll see there that there are 2 policy items, and one of them is a carry forward. And then that brings us to the top of page 34. You'll see this one is a new policy item, 20.2. Utilize zoning to support non-encroachment on airport and naval air station operations. And there you'll see 3 action items. Any comments, questions, concerns, or suggested language?
Has that been vetted through the NAS?
So the information was sent over to the CPLO. Obviously, they're still trying to, dig their way out of the mound of paperwork that I can, and I'm sure the emails in people's inboxes. So this is definitely something that has been sent. The good news is that this is just an initial draft, but I think this seems to reflect, I'm going to say, basic foundational principles of jurisdictions that have airports within their jurisdiction, whether they be municipal or otherwise. But I don't believe we've received any specific comment from the CPLO on this one, and we could certainly go, and Courtney, can you make a note of this, to reach out to her and staff?
The other thing I would ask is they were in the process, or they were going to update their AQs documents. Is there a time, have they done that, or is there a timeline for that we should be aware of? Because that will definitely impact what we do.
My understanding is likely that study was temporarily put on hold with the government shutdown, but I'm sure that they're looking to pick it back up and it'll be underway.
We'll
But
be
I
able to
don't
ask
have
that
a
question
definitive
Monday. It
date.
was on top of my list.
There you go.
Indeed, that is your next public hearing date.
Oh, yeah.
All right. So with that, goal number 21, strengthen the collaborative partnership with base command staff. While it says it's a new goal, obviously it's something that we're ever cognizant of. And prior to the shutdown, we did have plans to meet on a more regular basis. And those meetings generally also happened at a staff level. And so now that the shutdown is over, I would anticipate, and we've got the new DED director coming on board, I can say later this month. We are in the final month here, so coming on board, and I think those meetings would certainly reconvene at a staff level. So I don't know if there are any specific questions or concerns about goal 21. But then let's move on to goal 22 of 23. Drive regional economic development through airport growth. And in this particular case, we're talking about our regional airport. Any questions or concerns about the language on pages 35 and the top half of 36 regarding our municipal airport? If you do have those questions, I would suggest we table them until next time when DED staff will be here in attendance. So with that, we are at goal 23 of 23. Secure long-term airport viability through continuous improvement and funding. And I don't know if there are any questions or concerns there. All right. Well, Mr. Chair, that really does bring us to the end of this particular topic.
Did we already do the other?
And look here, we have public facilities and infrastructure investment. So we've got, as you can see, looking at the table of contents here for this section, we've got 8 goals. And a lot of these things are carry forwards.
Are we going to
from-
go ahead and try to fit that in?
Well, I'm going to say that that's up to you. So that's why I was just trying to lay the foundation here. So there are, 8 goals. A lot of these are carry forwards. We can certainly start chipping away at it, or if you're concerned about splitting things up, we can wait.
Well, we have a couple departments that we need that have had to leave. We can get them back.
Well, we do have Metcom, but I see that Heather has had to step out. So to the extent that there are questions or concerns for the health department, we can certainly flag those. But Mr. Chair, it's completely up to you, but it looks like Mr. Hauser's stepping out. And not seeing her, what would be your desire, sir?
We can start. I don't think we're going to be able to finish it. I think there's going to be some questions that,
Okay. All right. So we're talking about public facilities and infrastructure investment. And as I mentioned, there are 8 goals. The first few pages of this particular chapter explains, obviously, that public facilities and infrastructure are sort of the fundamental framework of what we need to have literally on the ground in order to create a thriving community. You'll see that there is a brief overview of existing conditions. I also just wanted to, as we go forward, we're going to be talking about certain other facilities, including Rec and Parks, and we do have Jessica Hale, the Deputy Director for Rec and Parks. She's also on the line. Her face, for whatever reason, is not popping up, but she is there hanging out in the background should we have questions or need clarification from her on anything. But you'll see the system overview talks generally about water and wastewater and stormwater management on page 3, carries on to public safety. And I see that Captain Simons had to step out. I don't know if he's able to return or not. So if you have questions that you would like to direct towards him, we can certainly make a note. And I'm sure we could reach out to him after the fact and get some feedback if you need feedback or clarification from him. So moving on to page 4, you'll see the beginnings of the summary of some of the concerns and priorities that were shared during our 2 community engagement windows. And that kind of carries us, there's quite a lot of information, as you can see, because the breadth of the information is far-reaching. So we don't actually get to any of the goals until page 9, but I don't want to rush too quickly into the first goal. Were there questions, comments, concerns about any of the information contained on pages 3 through 8?
Related to it, it's probably not specific, but the question goes to sewer capacity. And we talk about, of course, for development areas, keeping, maintaining it and keeping up with development, but I'm not sure we're keeping up with development and what we got now. So it's really questions about sewer capacity and water capacity as far as the status of our aquifers. It's come up a couple times before, but those would be, it's kind of underlying it or overlying it, however you look at it, these topics.
Well, the good news is that we do have Metcom here with us today. If you have specific questions or concerns, I'm sure that we could ask one or two of them to pop up if there are specific questions.
Well, maybe we can just start going through the goals, but I mean, I know we talk about it, but we also know that problems exist, or if you talk to the people about different sewage treatment plants, you'll hear immediately, well, that's already at capacity, we're barely keeping up. Don't know if that's true or if these are just comments that people make. It's like
Okay.
Piney Point or the one, what's the one that's south of the base where a lot of sewer, for example, goes. Can you tell me that we have capacity with what exists today?
So, good afternoon. So the one down by the base gate is Marley Taylor. That's our largest. That actually serves Piney Point as well.
It does.
So right now we have somewhere, and I didn't pull the number, and I should have, somewhere around 1,500 remaining. We might have more. We're doing a capacity analysis on everything to get exact numbers. So right now we have about 1,500 EDUs
EDUs
left at that facility.
that are available.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, does that include I think I heard a number like 4,400 that have been allocated to the base?
That excludes those.
That
So those are reserved, so they're set aside. So
Okay.
we consider them used.
Gotcha, and that would be the same for
The
St. Mary's,
college.
the college?
Yes, ma'am. The
So,
college has
700, I hear?
somewhere around there. Yes, ma'am.
Because they sold some back, I guess,
Mhm.
some
Yep.
time ago.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. So we think there's capacity with
Oh,
what-
there is.
There
yes.
is,
And
okay.
then in regard to that, so we also have, we keep track of how many EDUs there are every year, new connections that come through, and we're sitting right around 150-ish a year, new EDUs. So given the 1,500 left, we have about 10 years, left, given the 150.
Does that take into account the developments that we've approved?
No, so that's just what we've seen actual connections each year. It's about 150. That doesn't take into account what concept plans have been approved. We also have in our CIB budget, we have our preliminary engineering report, so a study to be done on that treatment plant for the next expansion in 2027, and then we have engineering funds available in FY 2031. So we are looking that's going to happen at some point in the
To
future.
expand
To
those-
expand that plant, yes, ma'am.
That plant. I guess that's the one plant I'm familiar with. Where's their other plants? Is Leonardtown?
So Leonardtown's separate. Leonardtown
Separate.
has its own. St. Clement Shores, which we actually just awarded the construction contract to upgrade that facility to include another 240 EDUs. So that'll serve that whole area, so that one should be good for a while. Wycomico is another. We're not seeing any growth up there. It's kind of been stagnant. So we'll see as developer projects come through, they may have to do some upgrades to that facility themselves in order to increase capacity there. Let's see, there's an Airedale Road, but was built for a certain number of EDUs and they're all connected, so
That's Ridge.
yes, ma'am. So no expansions there. I know I'm gonna miss a bunch. Charlotte Hall, pointing up north. Charlotte Hall also, so that plant was designed for 100 EDUs. It was the developer actually built the treatment plant, and then we took it over later. So those have all been given out. We don't have any plans currently to expand that system, but where that goes. As development comes through, we might need to do something there.
To do something there.
But again, most of our, or all of our growth is due to development, so should a big developer come through and want to do something up there, they could expand the plant themselves.
And then the other question is, because of the development that's going on, and I asked that this last time, is do we have any idea of the capacity of the aquifers that we use?
We'd have to get with MDE and see where those are at. They give us so many connections or so many gallons per, I think it's gallons per month is how the permits are written. Yeah. So again, we're looking at all the capacities of everything we have currently to make sure we're fine right now. We don't have any capacity issues on the water side. Some of the smaller developments like Grandview Haven, sometimes they in the summertime get into issues with they're using more water than we're technically allowed to pull out of the aquifer due to irrigation. So we have ways of sending them letters to make sure people are, monitoring how much water they're using. So that way we're not being fined by MDE if we go over that.
So for example, if we were to have a 1,000-unit development go in someplace, it would depend on, so it's a legitimate question to ask whether that 1,000-person development can be supported by the aquifer and what it would do, assuming it would do no harm to everybody else.
Right. And as new development comes in, and I think I've mentioned it a couple times, but any development over 25 EDUs has to do a water study for us to determine if a new well is needed, if a new water tower is needed, to make sure the lines are sized appropriately, so that we don't affect the existing communities.
Okay, thank you.
Christie, when you guys drill a well for a subdivision, and I was based upon the number of houses, EDUs, are you using the same aquifers that a homeowner?
No, so we
would
go
use?
down, and I believe it's the Patapsco, it's about 900 to 1,000 feet deep. Typical homes are in the Aquia, I believe, and they're around 300 feet.
Is it 350?
Yeah,
Something like
3 to 4, yeah, somewhere in
Okay,
there. It
'cause
kind of
nope.
depends on where you're at.
Because nobody monitors homeowners, of course. They're not, there's no meters or
Right.
nothing on that. Are they limited to a number of connections, or it's not any, it's just whatever on them?
It's based on the flow from that aquifer. So we have meters on all of our wells. So as water is pulled out, we have to account that to the state. So it's all based on
For you
the
guys?
actual use, for us.
For you.
Under our permit.
Okay.
Christie, you were talking about Marley Taylor and about plans for the future and such. Do you have an estimate of like how many more EDUs would be added?
No, we haven't even, that would be the first layer of that preliminary engineering report would look at that to see what the growth is and what the new capacity should be. And obviously, we work with land use and the health department to get that number, just like we did with St. Clement Shores.
Don't you also have some sort of limit of some sort of discharge?
Yes, sir.
I remember you guys talking about a couple years ago, you did something with a new discharge unit or something that was more efficient and it gave you more.
Yeah, so St. Clement Shores is going, so the treatment process is changing and that we're getting cleaner water at the end. It doesn't really change our discharge permit, meaning it changes the permit saying that, you have to have X number of nitrogen per milliliter and X number of phosphorus per milliliter, but it doesn't change the quantity. We could, if we upgraded the plant, it would upgrade the quantity of that discharge, if that makes sense. So when Marley Taylor goes through the upgrade, the state will be involved, and then our discharge permit would be updated with the new flow rates.
I was just remembering, and I'm probably off, and then I'm just curious, it doesn't affect anything in here. I was just wondering, I remember a few years ago, whatever goes through to process for the cleaner discharge, there was an issue with something that you had, and you did something new that was showing less discharge. I can't understand. I could remember something. I don't know the terms of all. I was just curious if that's what's going to happen, or you actually talking about an expansion.
No, it would be an expansion.
Expansion, okay. Thank you.
Yep.
All right. So now with that context, do you want to move to goal number 1? Yes. All right. So goal number 1 is obviously a carry forward, provide planned water and sewer for growth and reduce stormwater and nutrient impacts. And you'll see that all of the language that is on page 9, with the exception of the bottom, is all carry forward policy and action items. So the new one is action 1.1.3, update CWSP to reflect actual service areas, support development and growth areas, and identify areas of concern. And that is one of the things that is going to be occurring, at least with the with the service area maps. Those are going to, that are traditionally in the CWSP, those are going to be included in this St. Mary's 2050 plan. Let's see here. The action item goes on through to page 9, and there have been some internal conversations about removing and consolidating certain designations. And you'll see 2 other action items that are new action items. Do you have any questions about that? The first one is updating the adequate public facilities language in the CZO to ensure that requirements for water and sewer are consistent with other public facility requirements. I'm not sure why that language is there, because I'm pretty sure we already do that. But
Yeah, and I can also speak to it. The road APF requires, so I believe if the road is to be expanded by the county to meet APF, the road funding has to be 75% in the current fiscal year of the county CIB, I think is how it's.
When I was at Public Works, I changed that because what was happening is development projects were coming forward. The old language used to read, if a project was in the 6-year plan. So you could have a project that was 6 years out for design, and because it was in the CIB, the developer coming in today wouldn't have to do any improvements. So that was changed to 75% funded for construction in the current fiscal year. That way developers would be in more of a participatory nature. Metcoms still reads the way it used to read. It says if it's in the 6-year CIB. So the suggestion there, we had some conversations with the consultant, was to make sure that all public infrastructure had the same adequate public facilities requirement. Because we're not part of the county, that part was left off that revision of the zoning ordinance. So we'd like that language to read 75% funded in the current fiscal year, just like the rest of the public facilities.
You haven't changed yours yet? You said Metcom still says the
zoning ordinance still says for water and sewer adequate public facilities, the requirement is that it just be in the CID.
I got you.
So we just caught that.
Okay.
all right. So any questions about the other new action item 1.1.5, address problem sewer areas and problem water areas?
We don't have any right now.
There is a list of problem sewer areas in the CWSP, and McKay's Beach, I think, I couldn't name them all. There's a handful of areas that are of concern. I don't believe there are any water, though.
It impacts about 5,000 properties. I think the discussion about water, there were some areas in the county that had higher arsenic levels, not necessarily a public concern, but the fact that the arsenic levels were elevated was a concern, and those were in private wells. So the only way to address that, obviously, would be to connect to public water. And I think Heather would be better of a person to identify the locations. The sewer areas are identified by specific locations. And again, it affects about 5,000 properties.
Makes me want to go test my well.
My water.
If I remember right, I think the issue with the arsenic was in the Piney Point aquifer, which I think is like very shallow, so
Yeah, I better test my water.
But the way that reads, it's not, it doesn't read to that level that it's alarming, but it does identify that there may be issues, and you should probably take a look at it.
Says
Sewer is much more definitive.
Doesn't some of the old section of Breton Bay have some sewer problems?
there was a
The bottom
old
of the
section of
hill.
Breton Bay that had, yeah, so part of that is included on, if you're going down Society Hill, the right-hand side is included in the St. Clement Shores Treatment Plant upgrade, so all that was looked at.
But the
'cause
left
they-
side wasn't,
The
right?
left side wasn't.
Right.
And that was because they have tend to have larger lots and sewer reserve areas, so they kind of had another way to treat
It had a
sewer.
backup plan. The right side has no backup
I
plan,
see.
except pump and hole. That's a very expensive backup plan.
Uh-huh. Sure. Sure.
So that whole right side going down, not the whole area, but certain places on that right side was included into,
Almost the entire right side.
okay. I remember seeing the line,
Yep.
you know, when that was done. I just couldn't remember.
And that
exactly.
particular service area is on the county's GIS maps also,
Okay.
for planning purposes.
All right, so then moving on to policy 1.2, upgrade treatment and manage to nutrient caps. As you can see, this is carry forward as is the action item there. Then moving on to page 11, all of these policies and actions are carry forwards from our current 2010 plan. Any questions, comments, concerns, or suggestions for change in language there?
We can't implement them. He implements them, right? I mean, Metcom does.
So the county, actually, it's going to sound very strange, the CWSP really is what guides that, and that's a county policy. Metcom's really just a utility company where we serve those that the county says we can, does that make sense?
Yeah, where can I find more about MS4 programs? What is MS4?
That's in our shop.
Donnie.
What is it?
We have a whole division for, it's basically to manage stormwater management.
Stormwater.
You know, we're tracking devices on, that were installed to treat the impervious coverage, the runoff from the impervious coverage.
Thank you.
You keep the nutrients out of the bay, keep the bay as clean as possible. That program was codified by the state, and they put all the requirements down in every individual county, and they have to reduce a certain amount of those nutrients each year, whether it's phosphorus or nitrogen.
Yeah, I was going
And
to
so,
say someplace
Not
I,
cheap.
Yeah, it's
Yeah,
even
I-
sediment and everything.
that was Brenton Bay and St. Mary's River that I read in some of this material recently had high levels of some of that stuff.
All right, so unless there are Any questions? Any other questions, concerns? We can move to the top of page 12. And we've got 20 minutes to go here. So goal number 2, maintaining county transportation infrastructure. As you can see, the wording has been massaged a little bit, but this is really just a carry forward from the current plan. That would be in relation to goal number 2. Goal number 3 is maintain and increase quality of life by investing in core public services. And again, last time we talked about the importance of sort of the overall health of the community, and this starts to kind of give voice and a little bit more detail to that. And I see that Captain Simons has re-entered the room, so certainly if you have any questions or concerns about any of the policies that are listed here, there are 3 of them.
I can see 3.1, investing in law enforcement, but the 3.1.1, conduct a staffing and operational needs assessment for the sheriff's office. I think that's what the sheriff was elected for, is to take care of that problem.
You don't think that the planning commission does this in its spare time?
No, nor do I want to.
Right, sure.
I mean, they have been the professionals in that. I think the sheriff is, as I said, I think that's what he was elected for.
Indeed. So Leanne, I don't know if you can shed
How do you all feel about that?
I actually had a suggestion for an additional action, which would be adding law enforcement, an additional action, which would be adding EMS, law enforcement, and fire and rescue to 70.4 of the CZO to deem them essential public facilities.
Okay, so adding a new action item?
Yeah.
Okay.
For the comp plan or the current?
In the CZO you're
Yeah.
talking about? All right.
Yeah, and just because it mentioned earlier on the APF on 114, that kind of had my mind going on, what was actually included. And I mean, I did not see that there was methodology for law enforcement, fire and rescue, and EMS.
Okay, could I ask you to, even though we've got it on the tape, can I ask you to repeat your proposed language?
Okay. Add an additional action to deem EMS, law enforcement, and fire and rescue essential public facilities in 70.4 of the current CZO.
Okay, so then we would need to look at what the implications of that language would be.
And maybe instead of just maybe having explore in front of it, just the.
Sure. Okay, yep. Yep. But can we go back also to action 3.1.1, seeing as how this is a new action item? Leanne, can you tell us how this item popped up?
So I believe, Angelin, I think you all worked on this one as well, or at least this one was a collaborative one. To be honest, I don't recall exactly if that came from the interview that we had with the sheriff or not. I'd have to go back and look at the origination of that action to answer your question.
Okay.
So we can take a look at that.
All right.
But I kind of agree with Chairman Thompson, when the sheriff needs people, I mean, over the last 10 years, I've watched all the budget work sessions and commissioners' meetings and our meetings and whoever, and I've seen them come before the county commissioners multiple times asking for people or, funding for different stuff. So I think that's already happening when it's needed, or when they feel they're the ones that.
Right, on an annual basis, yeah.
Well, it's kind of, I think the sheriff, I don't know about the new sheriff, but I know prior to, we had seen the sheriff's department in front of the commissioners many times asking for, we need this position. I don't think they need that to tell them to do that.
Sure.
I mean, it hurt anything either, but.
Go ahead.
Good afternoon. If I could jump in real quick. Captain Steve Simons with the Sheriff's Office. So that particular action item came up per my recommendation. The 2010 plan really didn't address that. It kind of goes hand in hand with the facilities. But to your point, the sheriff is in control of the positions, how many sworn officers we need, how many correctional officers. But a lot of times we're talking a 25-year plan. So I think we just need to stay in tune. Meaning this, I think it's important for you guys, whether you conduct a full assessment, but at least to keep that in mind, because if we're talking 20 years out from now, I don't think it would be very realistic for any sheriff right now to say, well, I think we're going to have an additional 50,000 people within the county based on the housing and affordable housing that we're trying to build to bring people in. So this is more of a 25-year picture. There may reach a point where you would need to, based on X number of developments or X number of houses or housing projects that come in. Most of our stuff is more, 5 years and under. We know how many officers we currently have. We know what we're staffed for. We know how many people are retiring. So we can gauge a lot of that type of stuff to be able to come before the commissioners and say, hey, next year we have 5 officers that are retiring. We're going to need to fill those spots. We're going to need additional spots. But that's really hard to project for 25 years out. So again, whether it's a full assessment, but I think the main point is to have it identified some way within this plan so that we can stay in tune.
I just feel uncomfortable with conducting an assessment of the sheriff's department.
Would it be helpful?
In any, I feel uncomfortable. I'm going to leave it at that.
I think the assessment's done more on the public end of things, right? So, you can go to Wikipedia today and see it changes. It used to be 115,000 people, but whatever that is from year to year to year, I know those things can change. If they close the base down tomorrow, that would obviously have a huge impact, or if they doubled the size of the base equally, would have a huge impact on the county. So maybe it just needs to be reworded in such a way, not to step in and step on the sheriff's toes and tell them how many people they need, but I think to know how many people we currently have and what we're projected to have 15, 20 years out, whatever that goal looks like.
So would that be more of collaboration, between, I'm going to say, land use and growth management and DED perhaps, than with the sheriff's office, because we're all sort of under the broad umbrella of county. And then also maybe support requests for staff, increased staffing or operational.
I think it is no different than when we're looking at plans. We asked, do the schools support the influx of 10,000 kids coming in? I'm exaggerating. It would be the same thing, but if you had a development that could bring in 5,000 or 6,000 more people in Lexington Park, that has an impact on your department.
Absolutely, and it's a ripple effect. And when I made these recommendations, back to your point, I was only looking through the lens of law enforcement, but taking a step or 2 steps back, yes, that would impact all of public safety. The 2010 plan was so ambiguous. It was so vague. It kind of lumped everything together with really, I don't think, a definable direction. But these things are probably not soloed to just law enforcement or the sheriff's office.
Right.
They would expand into public safety as an overall reach.
Okay.
So just change it. Collaboration with law enforcement, EMS, et cetera, et cetera.
Yep, very good. We can absolutely massage that language, Courtney. You've got that down.
Yep, I sure do.
If I could just jump in, you could say something like, evaluate future staffing needs and operational needs for the sheriff and EMS based on county growth. Because that's what, I think is what he's saying, based on what's to come, would then determine what he would need, or vice versa.
Yeah, I think we should have checks and balances to keep it proportionate. We don't want to, we want to stay in tune, in step with one another.
Yep.
Right. I'm with you.
All right, so we can go back and massage that language a bit. So thank you very much for the feedback. All right, so that brings us to policy 3.2, budget for core capital improvements. This one is a new item, and I think what Captain Simons just shared kind of gives us a little bit of insight as to how this language got there. If there are any other questions or concerns? So this just kind of laying the foundation to continue to support what our first responders need to
We
support our
talked about
community.
it earlier, not today, but in our, when we were going through the first section.
Housing, probably.
Housing. And we talked about, I think you brought it up, didn't you, about the equipment? Water and, you brought up something.
I
Yeah, the
brought up
firehouses.
fire suppression for,
Okay.
yeah.
That
and
kind of stuff, we should go back and make sure that they are mentioned, if we, whatever we mentioned back in the first chapters,
Absolutely.
sessions, I mean.
And
And
I-
make sure it's incorporated in 321.
Yep.
Was that when we talked about that through the housing element? Trying to remember which one it was.
I can go back. It was-
Yeah, we can look up at the
You had some great-
cross-reference, because I know we've just had
remember
someone
which session
from the
it
county administrator's office remind us about time and the use of our room, because we do have the room only reserved till 5 o'clock. So that's something that we can cross-reference,
Right.
as you had suggested a couple meetings ago. Yep.
Action 3.2.1, we have a project that's ongoing for installing water tanks, storage. That's happening now. We've got about 3 installed. Could be off.
How big are they, Donnie?
So I don't know exactly how big they are as far as the number of gallons. But we've got them at various locations. We work with EMS and the volunteer fire departments to find the locations, get the site set, and go on and get these installed.
Good idea.
So I think we've got 3 of them in right now.
All right.
Good.
30,000.
Remember, Director, you have to come to the microphone.
Thank you, Metcalf.
To be heard. All right, so then moving on to our last policy of the day, I think policy 3.3, establish long-term fire and EMS plans. It looks to be like a new policy, but I got to think this is already happening. I'm not the expert.
I think it would be.
Okay.
All
Goal
right.
4.
I'm sorry?
Goal 4.
Okay. Goal number 4, expand reliable utilities and universal broadband access. I don't know if we've reached out to IT to help us with any of these items, but as you can see, they're all carry forward policies and action items. Are there any questions regarding any of that?
Maybe it's appropriate for us to stop, and then we can have IT for the next one, just to answer those, because there have been broadband issues.
Yeah.
And a lot of them been taken care of, but
Yeah,
Yep.
and there's, next section is aging, so we could probably have somebody from aging and then the parks, schools.
all right, I'm just gonna mark it out.
All right.
Okay.
So are you saying, Mr. Chair, that you would like to stop there for the day?
Yes, ma'am.
All right, very good. Then we will look to reschedule these other items and make sure that our subject matter experts are in the room. And I thank you for your time this afternoon.
Thank you. Okay,
Thank you.
thank you.